So when a man figures that out and says, you know what, maybe this is something that's applicable to us, maybe we can do something with this, then we're rat bastards for doing that. And if you are a properly conditioned blue pill beta man, it feels wrong to even mention or presume that you could use dread. And I understand. Now, here's the criticisms of dread. And what is dread in terms of game? Well, a lot of guys get carried away with it. Especially in the pickup artist, the modern contemporary pickup artist community right now, dread seems like an ultimatum, and it is really satisfying to that kind of sense of pro revenge, right? There's sort of like this retribution, like I'm going to use dread and really make it. That's overt dread, first of all, and then second of all, it's more of an ultimatum. And in that case, the guy who's talking here said, you know, it's pissy and it's reactive and it's like you're falling into her frame. If in terms of overt dread for people who don't know what they're doing or don't know what it's about, it seems like I'm going to be the man and put my fist down and you better shape up or ship out, lady. Like that's the form of like, I'm a high value guy. And if you can't recognize that, then well, looks like you better hit the road. Like that is like major bonehead PUA form of dread. So, and that's what usually anybody fixates on, particularly critics of game, particularly feminists, particularly blue pill guys. They say, well, you know, that's really obnoxious and arrogant and conceited and how dare you? How dare you? So what happens in that case is it ends up being an ultimatum, and ultimatums are essentially declarations of powerlessness. If you don't do what I feel so powerless that if you don't do what I tell you to do, then this is over. I wash my hands of the whole thing. And that sounds pissy and whiny and like you're a pouty little child, and I get it. Overt dread seems abusive. It seems like what an abusive like husband or boyfriend would do, and that's not the proper application of dread. And when I have written about dread, I've always said this, that there's two kinds of dread. First is the overt kind, which is the one I just mentioned here, which is sort of like do what I say or I'm gone, and playing on that sort of fear of loss. Well, first of all, that doesn't work unless that woman actually has an invested value in you in the first place. So if you're using it as a form of game, like in the early stages of like getting together with a plate or a girl or a girlfriend or whatever, that's probably, yeah, it's going to sound pissy and reactive and you're leaning over into her frame. Got it. But passive dread is another thing. And if you've read my first book, The Rational Male, in the very first chapters, there is a chapter called Imagination. And imagination is the single best tool in your PUA game, red pill, whatever, toolbox. Prompting a woman's imagination is key to a good long-term relationship. It's key to good game. It's key to so many elements. Like last week when I was talking about what are the three sort of linchpins or keystones, I guess, of game. And that is frame, who's qualifying to who, qualification, and imagination. So imagination is the one that I'm focusing on here. So what has to happen for any kind of dread to even take place, that woman has to have some sort of invested value in you to work in the first place. Because if you're just some guy on the internet, if you're just some beta orbiter, if you're an OnlyFans pay pig or simp or whatever, the value of your attention is minimal. But if you're a high value guy and that woman happens to be, say, 28 and just entering into her epiphany phase, that contextually is going to create a greater sense of value invested in you, particularly if you have a lot more going for you, if you have a lot of potential. So if you've met a woman and she's 27, 28 years old and she's this side of the epiphany phase, or as some other people are calling it, it's the wake up phase. It's almost like a crisis point. And I'm happy that women are finally sort of recognizing the epiphany phase, but there it is. But if you've got a woman that's just sort of inside the epiphany phase, she's going to have a different set of priorities to place value on you. And she is probably more likely to invest a little bit more quickly, let's say, because that sense of urgency, knowing that her sexual agency is perishable. That's why when women get to the epiphany phase, they tend to be much more, let's say, susceptible to dread, because there is that sense of need and urgency to consolidate on a guy who's high value. So if that, and then also having the discernment to know whether that guy is or he isn't. And then that's where it's usually at this time where you'll hear women say, men are so infantile. Men are commitment phobic. Men are afraid, or they're fearful of a strong, independent woman. They're threatened by a powerful woman, right? And so it's at that point during the epiphany phase that the dread is sort of setting in for women, because it's not so much it's this idea that they need to shame guys, or they need to find some way to sort of force guys into their frame and into their life plan, now that they're getting to the point where it's slim pickings, right? Where they're experiencing less sexual selectivity as a result of the next crop of 22-year-olds coming into the sexual marketplace and displacing them. So yes, when it comes to dread, there is an age-specific contextualness that goes along with all of that.